It's hot in here. It's like a spider bite. How do we feel about that?
What you looking at,
My cameraman looked like it's daytime.
Yeah, dude.
I like those movies.
How are y'all doing this evening? Very nice, very good. I'd like to welcome you all to the former West Virginia State Penitentiary. My name is Jason, your tour guide. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me on the tour here. Like I say, take photos, videos of me. I don't personally mind. I just don't want to accidentally break the camera. Everything started here with the penitentiary back in 1866 when it was established. This was open for 129 years actually as a maximum security state prison for West Virginia until March 27, 1995. So it's only been closed about 27 years. When it closed, this was still home to 652 of the most violent inmates in the state. To give you a better idea, about 1 in 3 of these men had life sentences of some kind. Upon closure, most of these guys would be sent downstate to Fayette County to the maximum security Mount Olive Correctional Complex. Medium security inmates were sent to Huttonsville along the Virginia border, and ironically, some of these guys never left Moundsville. A few blocks that way on 12th Street is a modern maximum security state prison called the Northern Regional Correctional Center and Jail. It's one of the only ones of its kind in the country in operation that serves as both a state prison and a regional jail for the northern counties of West Virginia. Now, many people nowadays tend to believe a dangerous, bad, violent prison to be somewhere like Alcatraz, right? You know, everyone's heard of Alcatraz, kind of a household name now. Those of us who work here kind of scoff at that because Alcatraz was a maximum security federal prison, but it was only open for 36 years, and during that time they had a total of 28 documented deaths of inmates. Just during the last 75 years this prison was in operation, there were 998 documented deaths. 94 of those are attributed to state-sanctioned executions because prior to 1965, West Virginia did have the death penalty in effect. 85 men were hanged here, and 9 men lost their life in Old Sparky in our lobby, the electric chair. Obviously, hundreds of natural deaths attributed to that. Back in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, tuberculosis, diphtheria, influenza, smallpox spread like wildfire. But there were 36 documented murders during the later years, and around 45 documented suicides. So, as we go along today on the tour, I will show you where some of these deaths happened. I'll tell you about how they happened. But we'll spend most of the time on the north end behind me. That's the Civil War era side built by the first convicts to arrive here back in 1866. It took those men 33 years to build the north half of the prison, and they put pride into that work. And you'll be able to see that pride here a little bit later when we get to the yard. Problem with the north end was they only built it to house about 800 men. Well, in the 1920s, they ended up with over 2,700 men. They had to put 3 men into a 5. Oh, right. There we go. Now we are awake.
you still
All right. So, there he is. There he is. All right. So, with the overcrowding, they had to put 3 men into a 5x7 cell. You see these cells later, it's going to blow your mind that there were 3 men in them for many years. If you take the wall behind me and you stretch it south, sorry, didn't mean to blind you, this is called South Hall. This was built by contractors from 1929 to 1959 to alleviate overcrowding. We'll make a loop on that north end, we'll wind up down here later. Most of the inmates here are mainline population inmates. They're most of the guys here, about 500 to 600 of them. They lived in New Wall, down below New Wall. That'll be our final stop later. If those guys had trouble adjusting to prison life or coexisting with staff and population, they would end up in segregation in North Hall. North Hall was the jail within the prison. Those guys are in their cells 22.5 hours every day. So they much prefer to be in New Wall down here. The wall at the end of the hallway is a fake wall that we built to obscure view from our haunted house attraction we have every October. This is a big hall. Goes another 200 feet beyond that point. You got protective custody down there. PC was Punk City, Rat Row. That would have been for rats and snitches, informants, and for ex-law enforcement officers, and for child molesters. Now the housing unit at the far south end of the prison is known as Honor Hall. That's where your trustee honor inmates, and they're the most well-behaved guys here. Just watch your step up here behind me. There is a little rise in the floor up here.
They're carrying 2 bags in there. Back here out of nowhere. That almost got me. Sweet down that.
What's up, Tyler? Cody?
You better turn your flash off. Blinding me. God, I'm backpack man.
Backpack man?
I just want to ask for the backpacks. Contact visitation. No, you're back. Cookie, I'm like,
I want to run down that hallway.
Chat's like a little kid on Christmas Day.
Yep.
Little shadow man.
The inmates did it.
Really?
Yeah.
Yo, I can't see that.
The prison for a couple purposes over the years. First, imagine this wall gone, the wall behind me gone. This entire first floor area, including about 200 feet north of me, was wide open. The ceiling would have been 1 floor higher. There used to be a cell block right here where you're standing, what we call the South Hall cell block. This would have been 4 tiers high, or what we call 4 floors high, 4 tiers, 240 stone cells. Now, South Hall cell block would have contained death row back when they were executing these men. 1968, they had 2 riots in this prison that same year, one in February and one later in June. So later in 1968, West Virginia would tear South Hall cell block out. They installed a new second floor, which became medical unit, where we will be later. And the lower level where we are now was converted to dining hall. I'm not going to blind anybody, but over by the door you will notice a little window. That would have been the pill window where inmates would receive their medications that had to be taken with food. The problem with this dining hall and its kitchen, this was terribly infested with all kinds of vermin. Everything from small field mice to rats the size of small cats and small possums. Cockroaches often days were found cooked up in mashed potatoes. The inmates that fix this food were never given hairnets or gloves. So these guys are in here eating other men's fingernails, hair, dead skin, God knows what they're eating. The ceiling of this dining hall was infested specifically with mice and rats. Now when they die up there, the flies come in, and I've heard a lot of stories from inmates and CEOs over the years, how maggots would fall from the carcasses, falling from the drop ceiling, landing in these men's vegetable soup or whatever. It's hard for most of us to imagine those things in totality. It's not hard to imagine a number of violent riots in this prison's history because of these problems and these conditions. Where you all are standing right now in this former dining hall is where the last and the most violent riot in West Virginia State history kicked off. It's more infamously known as the New Year's Day riot of 1986. And it started basically at that column. It lasted 52 hours. 16 hostages were taken, and 3 inmates were considered informants were brutally murdered. The problem was, these inmates have been promised change by the state of West Virginia for years with little to no action. So during the uprising, they come up with a list of 15 demands. And again, these were mostly improvements, positive change that they wanted to see happen. Governor Archmore at the time finally got here to negotiate with these men and their leaders, but they only agreed on one of their 15 demands, which would be a new dining hall. A dining hall that would replace this old one. A dining hall that wouldn't just be cleaner, but it would have AC and heat and better food quality. So that agreement brought the 86 riot to an end. The new dining hall cost over $3 million in the long run, and it opened in March of 1987. At that time, they took what used to be a big open room and converted it into a hallway and a couple smaller rooms. And you're standing in one of those rooms now. This was formerly used for contact visits, so we call this contact visitation. That's why you can tell the artwork reflects a family-friendly environment. The inmates that painted this room wanted this to be a nice gesture for the little ones. You know, it would have been kind of nerve-wracking for anyone years ago, but those little kids don't understand what's going on, right? I mean, it's noisy, it's smelly, much less the officer up above with 12-gauge shotgun staring at everybody. The kids don't know what's going on. Now, one of the guys that painted this room was colorblind. His name is Sean. And if you notice, that's why the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are wearing the wrong color sashes. And they're holding the wrong buttons. Raphael and Leonardo are switched around, just to give you an idea. The display in the corner is of the ancient Adena Indians, and they were the mound builders here in the Ohio Valley, obviously given our namesake. How many of y'all noticed the mound right across from the prison when you pulled up? That's actually the Grave Creek Mound, and that's the largest one of its kind in North America. The little boy Indian in the display is missing his face, and the only reason for that is the Department of Corrections still own the prison. They host a lot of law enforcement, correctional training.
Go ahead.
This is the hallway.
He was so happy.
So, just to give you an idea how big this old dining hall was, remember this wall right here was not here. Where I'm standing on back to that far wall, and from the wall right here west by Jefferson Avenue, this was all dining hall. They could feed 300 at a time if they wanted. Tile portion of floor stretched over by Jefferson Avenue was serving area where they got their trays, and where the tile floor ends on back would have been the kitchen. So this is all remodeled. This became known as the MDR, or the main dining room hallway. If you take the door in the middle, stretch it up to the corner behind me, that was called the state shop, where inmates state issue clothing and bedding were all stored, and where they were deloused when they got here. Strangely enough, right near their clothes and beds. But nowadays, those of us who work here, many of us prefer to call this the Shadow Man hallway. If you've seen any of the paranormal TV shows or YouTube shows here over the years, you maybe already recognize this hallway. A good friend of mine, her name is Polly Gear, back in May of 2004. She was spending the night here. It's around midnight or so at the time. She's about halfway down, heading in the direction of the lobby, when Polly heard a metallic noise behind her. She flipped around, and right in front of the new cafeteria door, she spotted a solid black shadow standing there facing her direction. She put her flashlight down there. She said it seemed transparent, but even stranger, whatever that thing was appeared to have acknowledged the light, because it kind of looked down, looked back at Polly like, what's this? What are you doing to me? Now, strange enough, she continues walking backwards in this hallway. She had a Sony Mavica. She raised her camera and took one photo capturing the shadow that we call the Shadow Man. Now, if you haven't seen it yet, we do have a copy of it in our museum. For that matter, it's all over the Google image search. But see, a little before Polly's visit, around 1999, MTV was here. They filmed a pilot episode of a show called Fear, which has been off air for many moons now. You can find our episode of Fear on YouTube. And that's really what helped get us recognized nationally in terms of being a supernaturally active, a haunted location, whichever you prefer to call it. Ever since MTV's visit, I promise you, you name a paranormal show, we've probably had them at least once. Starting with MTV Fear, most haunted from England, scariest places on earth, most terrifying places in America, Dead Files, Preston Files, My Ghost Story, Ghost Stories, Ghost Island, Ghost Life, Paranormal State, Ghost Hunters, Ghost Adventure, Paranormal Challenge, Destination Fear, Mysteries of the Abandoned, Mysteries at the Museum Stranded, just to name a few. So with any luck, maybe I'll have some of y'all repeat this for me later. So. All right, so I'll show you this new dining hall they built after the riot. Went right in there.
Huh? Is that him? No.
My God. No, 33 minutes. Once you can already cross in 33 minutes.
Oh, it just doesn't until my storage gets full. It doesn't tell me. Right here is where the picture was taken.
Oh, really?
Yep.
And I got another 33 minutes before my storage
That's
comes
alright.
I promise when you get your home, you won't spend the night here. You ain't coming home with us.
I wonder if the water fountain works.
I doubt it.
Take a little sip.
Dude, it's cold in here.
Crazy. There's our camera.
Is there anybody here? Let me just get the REM pod out and just.
Sit there.
They have. Last November, I was in here on a tour, actually standing right over in this area, and I had my flashlight out. And when I shined my flashlight over on the diet line there, I seen a solid black shadow standing behind the chow line because I could see the handrails right in front of him. Looked like he was kind of like doing this, and that was with my light directly on him. And I took my light off because it didn't register at first what I seen, and yeah.
So, is it just glimpses or does it stay there?
It's just glimpses. Because by the, I take my flashlight off, well, what the heck? I put the light back and it's gone. So it was right over there. But this was the main result of the 1986 riot. Inmates appreciated this dining hall because they felt they put the effort in to acquire it through the uprising. Now, this was the only area that your mainline inmates had access to daily with AC and heat. I can tell you in the winter, some of the housing units could be between 45, 55 degrees. In the summer, the hottest temperature recorded inside a cell, it was in July, it was 130 degrees Fahrenheit. And there's guys in there. So in here, every day of the year would have been a nicer 68 degrees. The food these guys ate was pretty downright good for a place like this. Pork chops, hamburgers, hot dogs, french fries, onion rings, chicken wings, pizza, spaghetti, ham on Easter, Thanksgiving. They had over 200 turkeys in the freezers. Really wasn't that bad. Now all that food was prepared, cooked, and served by trustee or what they call honor inmates. You'd have about 20, 25 of them in the kitchen. And they took care of all that work. Some people cringe at the idea, I'd never eat food that a prisoner made. There's not a whole lot to worry about. Typically, those guys that take care of themselves, they didn't want to jeopardize that job in the kitchen. Kind of a testament to that is every day many of the officers and staff here would pay $1.05 plus tax, and they could eat the same food that the convicts were eating. Now, these guys and gals being from the local area seen that as a bargain. Well, I can't get a better meal in Moundsville at a better price. But they would eat their food over in that corner behind the diagonal wall, so they didn't have 120 inmates over here staring at them. You can imagine how that would add to the tension, maybe start a fight or whatever. That's why they're back there in that corner. All the stainless steel tables have since been repurposed at other state prisons in West Virginia, but if you look closely on the squares on the floor, you'll see where they were bolted down. Now, there are some security cameras in here. Pay no attention to those. You'll see a lot of those in the prison tonight. Those have only been here for a few years. When the prison was open, they had no security cameras. Just keep that in mind tonight. The artwork in here was done by the same guys that painted the visiting room we just walked out of. Their names were Sean Adamy, Jim Atkins, and Smitty Harding. Smitty Harding used to be a trucker. He painted the image of the semi over there. Well, he was on the highway Monday to Friday of each week. He got home late one Friday night, and as soon as he got home, he said his wife Sandy had nagged him. So what does he do? He murders his wife, he dismembers her, stores her in a freezer for a week until she's finally discovered. He was sentenced to life without mercy, no parole, because how aggravated that was. He was here in 1995. They transferred Smitty down to the Mount Olive Correctional Complex. He died there about 4 years ago. But later on tonight, you'll have to go over, check out that painting, because right next to the cab door of that semi-truck, he painted a memoriam for his wife Sandy that he murdered. So, kind of wacky stuff. That's why anytime an inmate or an officer would ask Smitty why he done what he did to his wife, typically he would say the same thing. I love Sandy, but she shouldn't have nagged me. So that was usually his answer. For sake of time, I won't take you into the kitchen. If you go into the kitchen later, just please be careful. There's a lot of tripping hazards from electrical and plumbing hookups. Also, there's about 7 walk-in freezers in the back of the kitchen. If you go into one of those, please be aware they are not reefer units. You cannot open them from the inside. So if you go into the freezer, you close the door, make sure you have someone on the outside ready, willing and able to open the door for you, or else you'll be stuck in there all night. This being the most modern addition to the prison, this is an unusually active area of the penitentiary. We get a lot of sounds of movement, shuffling here in the dining hall. You'll get a lot of shadow activity over in the corner between the kitchen door and the 2 windows, or vice versa. If you want to see one of those photos of the shadows, catch up with me later. I have one on my phone. The kitchen, same thing. You get a lot of shuffling, movement noises over at that far side where the dishwashers are. And then also if you have a spirit box or a ghost box, any of those devices, they have been known to have some luck in the kitchen as well.
Oh, where's that in the kitchen?
So, just
Spirit box.
food for thought. Any questions?
took a picture before he said it. Before I took a picture with the flash, someone was standing there.
What?
Yeah. It's the black figure. You see like the outline of the door?
At least
It was black.
4 to 5, at
But in
least.
the picture there's something there.
Typically, the first round of breakfast, I understand, would come in around 6:30 or so in the morning. Because like I say, it would take so long just to get the rotations done, and then be able to, turn around and get ready for lunch. Same thing later for dinner. So between 4 to 5 at least.
There's nothing in the picture.
Pretty active area. You have 120 every 30 minutes, and that's roughly half a cell block at a time here. So,
I got a question.
yes.
Weren't there inmates buried inside the walls because the guards wanted to keep that a secret?
Yes, yes. That happened mostly in the 19th century. A lot of the inmates that were, well, you got to be careful how I say it. A lot of the guys that died here and were unclaimed, and a lot of guys that died because of neglect and abuse by the administration, they were buried on the prison grounds. I've heard also, and I've read, that some of their bodies were used as backfill when they were building the perimeter walls for the prison itself. So that's absolutely fact. In 1929, when they started working on the south end of the prison and they were digging the 6-foot trenches for the perimeter wall, because they're only 6 feet deep, they found about 4 unidentified bodies of inmates. And those would have been for those early years.
Yeah.
So, in the 1880s, they had an average of 1 to 2 inmate deaths per month just from abuse and punishment.
Yeah.
I'll say punishment with quotations. All right. Any other questions so far? All right, so we'll go ahead and move out to the north yard. I'll get you acquainted with that.
That guy's in a rush.
Oh, yeah. He's excited.
Yeah. He's $40 spent well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, this is cool. Yeah.
I'm backpack man. Come on.
Kevin, we're going to put you in the freezer and shut it.
Okay.
You'll be staying here all night.
I was thinking about volunteering.
Look, you staying here all night.
I was thinking about volunteering. Volunteering for everything work? No.
You probably can turn your flash off out here.
Probably.
Yeah.
But it's can't make it different brightness. And I'm having trouble with both cameras.
Yeah, I did earlier.
Getting the lights on.
Yeah.
Like way earlier, like 4 hours ago.
I didn't figure anybody would sit down, so I did. Yeah, it is. So this is all the north yard. If you look over in the distance, you'll see it looks like a church steeple. That's the north wagon gate. That's the original prison. The first 100 inmates to arrive here would have lived in there, packed in like sardines. More importantly, those guys built this side of the penitentiary. Every single block of sandstone you see over here was cut, beveled, and laid by convicts' hands. Painstaking effort for them to build a place that would incarcerate them, right? But they still put pride into this work. It gave them a sense of purpose. When you see the south end later that was built by contractors with machine cut stone, it does not hold a candle to the quality or character of the north end. Now, have any of y'all seen Blues Brothers, the Dan Aykroyd, John Belushi?
Yeah.
This funny movie from the 80s.
Yep.
At the beginning of Blues Brothers, Elwood picks Jake up from Joliet Prison in Illinois, Joliet Jake. Joliet is our sister prison. Joliet's a larger prison, but Moundsville and Joliet are both beautiful examples of Gothic revival architecture, resembling a castle. Excuse me, back in a time of the world when they wanted a prison to look very ominous and uninviting, as opposed to nowadays when they build prisons, they basically all look the same when you really think about it. Now, the tallest part of the prison was the old administration building.
Until 1960, the warden and his families would have lived on the 3rd and 4th floors. That was normal life for them. Some of the warden's children used to come out, mingle with the convicts. Never had any trouble out of that either. Until 1960, 2nd floor would have been administrative offices for the warden, deputy warden, the clerk, magistrate, ombudsman, records office, people like that. The 1st floor and the basement of that part of the prison I'm going to hold off on right now because we'll be passing through just a little bit later. Now, you'll notice the blue building behind me is also modern. That's from around 1972. That was West Viriginia State Industries building, basically a big factory. You had a couple hundred guys that had jobs in there. They could work in welding, electrical, woodworking, photography, automotive. They also made license plates in there and highway signs. In our museum, you got to check out later, we have a 1982 license plate that's a little bit yellow. Well, they made a lot of yellow plates here in 1982 because the inmates were peeing in the paint. And the reason they were urinating in the paint was that they knew the ammonia in their urine would gradually cause the license plates to crack and peel. They made piecework over there. So they realized, hey, the more pee plates we make, that's job security for us. We got to make more new plates. So a lot of inmates are very intelligent guys. A lot of wasted intelligence, right? Very clever, very sharp. So the DOC has some offices in that building now. They do some training in there. The rest of that building is our event center. If y'all are ever looking for a venue to host any kind of gathering, it could be birthday party, family, or class reunion. My favorite, a wedding. Give us a call.
Have a wedding here.
Usually every year, we have 1 or 2 couples that wants to get married in the prison walls. I personally can't think of a better place I'd like to receive my life sentence. So, happy life sentence, that's the difference, happy life sentence. You'll notice the base of the walls are painted white because in 1980, the inmates started wearing khaki and they became invisible against the wall. Escapes have been a big problem here. In 129 years, they had a little over 500 escapes from this prison. Kind of embarrassing to admit that. It looks secure, but that's just, it looks secure. These guys have nothing but time to plan, right? I mean, if you have multiple life sentences, why not? What do you got to lose? Why not try and get out? Numerous tunnel escapes over the years. Numerous times guys would steal a truck, crash out of one of the gates. One inmate escaped in the back of a cement mixer. The walls are roughly 26 feet high. Very commonly, these guys would climb them and scale them with homemade grappling hooks and with ropes they braid from their bed sheets and uniforms tied together. So you think about it, people always say, oh my God, was the houses outside the prison when it was open? Yes, this side of Moundsville grew up around the prison walls. Those people are the safest people, even in the event of a mass escape, because you think about it. If you're an inmate, you get on the outside of this place, you ain't gonna hang out next door. You're gonna gain ground as fast as you can, either into the mountains or across the river into Ohio, and that's what these guys would do. So, no one in the town of Moundsville was ever harmed by the escapees over 129 years, never. So, but it was a big problem. We're going to work our way progressively towards the north wagon gate.
Is Juliet still a prison? Or did they?
You know, I don't think, well, actually,
I wouldn't.
I think part of it may be operational, unless I'm confusing that with somewhere else. But I know a good portion of it has been condemned.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had some friends go up there and take a look at it, but
Is that staggered development?
I think most of it's closed, to be honest with you. Yeah.
What the fuck are these covers?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it would be cool. I've heard that about once a year they'll do walking tours of it, where they'll take, but they don't really take you inside any of the buildings, I guess. It's just on the grounds, you know. But which kind of sucks, but yeah,
Someone on the inside.
right. Yeah. Yeah, because me being me, if I was there, I'd be like, no, I'm going into that kind of place, and I'll risk it, you know, just to see it, you know. A lot of history. Freddie.
Freddie.
Fast Freddie.
Was he caught every
Freddie
time?
Hamilton. Yep. He's down at Mount Olive. I was just watching a video about him before I drove down. Yeah, Freddie Hamilton. One of the COs from Mount Olive recently told me that they thought they were going to lose him a couple times over the last few years. He's been really bad sick. Anyway, he's still hanging in there. But yeah, no, they called him Fast Freddie because he was a well-known rabbit. You know, he liked to run. He escaped from this place a handful of times. 1992, the last major escape here from this prison. He was one of 3 convicted murderers that escaped. When they found Freddie, he was all the way out in Oklahoma. They asked him where he was going, and he said he was going to California so he could golf on Pebble Beach.
God, he's found all that Oklahoma.
Yeah, he's going to die at now. He's got a life sentence without any hope.
That's way west. That man was
Absolutely.
running.
Now you'll notice behind the big blue building, there's a smaller blue building. If you imagine that building gone and a 2-story brick building there instead, that would have been the female ward. Because until 1947, the prison was co-ed. Now at most, they only housed about 100 ladies here until 1947. In my opinion, it was one of those ladies who was probably the most notorious inmate ever locked up here. Her name was Kathleen Maddox. Now by chance, do any of y'all recognize Kathleen Maddox?
Yep, it's Charles Manson's mom.
Charlie Manson's mother. Charlie Manson's mother and his uncle Luther. They were both here for a few years for armed robbery. Back in the 30s, they robbed a gas station with a broken ketchup bottle.
He left you hanging.
They got him a few years here in the pen.
Yeah.
Now at the time, Charlie's about 7 years old. He's growing up with his Aunt Glenna up in McMecken. That's just a few miles away. Charlie Manson was in this prison a lot as a child visiting his mom. I'll give you an example. If you get on YouTube later at your hotel room, you look up Charlie Manson San Quentin. That was his first prison interview. They say, Charlie, what about your mother? He says, my mother was the icebox. My mother was the penitentiary. And of course, in his wording, that's his thought association, right? He thought about his mom, he thought of this gray stone place. Still to this day, he has family that lives in this area. March 1983, he wrote a letter to the warden here, Donald Bordenkircher, requesting to be transferred from Vacaville to Moundsville to put him close to his family, which we do have a copy of that letter in our museum. The only thing Bordenkircher wrote back is he wrote, Dear Charlie, when hell freezes over. Didn't feel like doing Charlie a favor here, but that was a true story. A few blocks that way is an old county courthouse. Before Charlie moved to California, he actually married a lady in that courthouse from Cadiz, Ohio. Her name was Rosa. Married her in there before they moved to California. So, a bunch of wacky Manson trivia. Now, their building was torn out in the late 60s. What we have there now, that blue building, was built the time the factory was, the industries building. That was the OMC, the Old Man's Colony. That would have been for inmates 65 and older with serious health problems or trouble walking. It was a much safer area to put those guys in there away from younger population. They put the electric fence up to keep the younger guys out, not really to keep the old guys in. When the prison closed, the youngest inmate in there was 76 and the oldest was 92 years old. A guy named Freeman Collins. There's no cells in there, that's just an open dormitory. Nowadays, the Marshall County uses that for their education center for adults. So that's where people come to nowadays to get their GEDs. They come to prison. You're not missing anything. If you go over there, there's nothing to see. Now, I told you briefly earlier about the executions. When those executions were taking place, they would have happened in the death house. Now, the death house would have been a building, 2-story white building. It stood right over where the bullpens are now. The bullpens are what we call those fences with the concertina wire. So take the bullpens out, picture that 2-story white building, that was it. Until the summer of 1931, you all could have came here on the day of a hanging, bring your kids with you, bring a picnic basket. You'd be charged $2 at the wagon gate, and you'd go watch them hang a man with your children. Back when the world was a different place, back when family entertainment was very morbid, because the Moundsville newspaper would advertise these hangings exactly like this. Pack a picnic, bring your family to the state penitentiary and enjoy a nice hanging. They done that till July of 1931 when they executed Frank Heyer. Frank Heyer was 5'8" and weighed almost 400 pounds. When they hang an inmate, if it's done the right way, the rope is measured on a calculation of their height and weight. His rope was too long. When the drop doors opened, Frank instantly decapitated and his head landed in front of a group of people that paid $2 to be there. Another lesson learned the hard way here. After that, the warden made it invitation only. So you'd have to be the inmate or victim's family or a member of the media otherwise to have access to those executions. 1965, they abolished the death penalty in West Virginia, no longer had a purpose for the death house. You know, these inmates seen it as an eyesore, right? I mean, at that point, the death house was a grim reminder of the past. They felt so serious about that, they put together a petition to the warden to get rid of the death house. 1967, Warden Bowles tore it out. The bullpens we got there now, those are recreation yards for the inmates in North Hall. North Hall was segregation. That was basically the jail within the prison. It was for punishment. 22 and a half hours a day, those guys are locked in their cells. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner was fed to these men on plasticware inside their cells. The only time they would leave North Hall, they would be strip searched and escorted out no more than 2 at a time until you have 5 in each bullpen. They get 1 hour outside there. Then taken back in North Hall, strip searched again, put into the shower for a few minutes, and then taken back to their cell for the next 22 and a half hours. Inmates called North Hall the Alamo. They said it was their last stand. It was a kill or be killed type of environment. It was hell on earth. Many of the guys in North Hall felt they no longer had anything to live for. It made them very careless, extremely dangerous. A testament to that is that razor wire on top of the fencing, kind of deceiving because it's really shiny. That is as shiny today as it was when they installed it in 1987. That's stainless steel military grade concertina wire, like what they use in combat. That's designed to bleed you out. Every inch of it is razor. There's butterfly-shaped meat hooks on it that will go into your muscle fibers and create more damage when you tense up. That was manufactured by the Gillette Razor Company, which when you get a close look at it, you'll see what I mean, that it's the best a man can get. Your guess is as good as mine where these guys going, even if they get on the outside of the bullpens. These perimeter walls are keeping them in. They did have 2 particular inmates try it. They tried it on the north-facing side to climb through. Of course, they didn't actually make it through. One of the 2 guys had to been put into surgery. It's nasty stuff. So, when we go in North Hall, you're going to see these 5x7 cells have a lot of cell writing in them, a lot of artwork. It's all original from the inmates and the way they left it 27 years ago. When we go in, you're going to notice that the first 4 cells are separate from the rest of North Hall. Those guys had to be kept separate more so because they were the highest ranking gang members of a gang here called the Aryan Brotherhood, or the AB for short. They ran this place in the later years. When you go in, the first cell you will approach was the leader of the AB here, a guy named William Red Snyder. He murdered his father and the father of his sister's boyfriend with a high caliber hunting rifle. He got here, he killed a couple guys himself, made him very feared but yet well respected amongst population. Red was the kind of convict, he would literally tell the COs, he would say, don't get in my way and you and I will have, we won't have any trouble, we'll get along. But if there's a guy that gives you trouble here, tell me who he is, give me some smokes and I'll kill him for you. And a pack of cigarettes, he probably would have killed anybody in this place. 2 cells down from Red was his good buddy, Rusty Lassiter, who was in on grand larceny, segregated in North Hall for a stabbing he was involved with. Red and Rusty were the only 2 of those particular guys allowed out here together for a few years because they thought they were keeping each other out of trouble. The problem was, Rusty actually had to answer to another high-ranking gang member of the Aryan Brotherhood. Convicted murderer, a guy by the name of Elijah Sarton. In prison he went by Blue. He's over at 12th Street right now in Northern. He'll end up dying over there. Rusty was Blue's boy, or his punk, as they say in prison. He had to basically answer to him. Blue and Red started having some inner politics, if you will, in terms of how the gang here, the AB, should be ran and operated. Of course, Blue understood that if something were to happen to Red, or if Red left the prison, it would bump his status up in the gang. I don't know how Blue done it, what he said, and how he said it, but he gave Rusty the order to take his buddy Red out. He had to orchestrate Red Snyder's murder in the afternoon, November 16, 1992. They made sure he'd have drugs on this day. Anytime he had drugs, he'd take them so he had a buzz for the yard. This particular day, he had Valium. He gets high on Valium, all right? The officer comes up, he unlocks the key lock to Rusty and then Red's door. But because of the 2-stage lock in North Hall that I'll briefly demonstrate when we're inside, by the time their door is open, the officer's all the way at the other end. Buys Rusty at least 20 seconds. He walks out of his cell, he goes up, he looks in at Red, and he asked him if he's ready for the yard. Red was visually impaired. He was defenseless from his Valium. He ran in there, pulled out the dull shank he had made, and stabbed Red 37 times in his chest, neck, and face, causing him to asphyxiate on his blood beneath his bunk. I can tell you all, those of us who work here now, we definitely consider Red Snyder to be an active resident of the penitentiary. We get a lot of weird, freaky, unexplainable stuff that happens immediately in and around his cell. You may notice there's actually a plastic harmonica in there that some people like to give him gifts or offerings, harmonicas, tobacco, whatever, in hopes of getting him to talk with you. So Red Snyder's cell will be the first one you approach when we go in. It says Aryan Brotherhood in there. Do be mindful, there is low clearance with the ceiling in there, and just watch your step.
Yep.
Yeah, Aryan Brotherhood. Yeah, right there. That's it. Yeah.
Yep, there it is. This is his.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Check it out. Oh, I gotta take a picture of this. Oh man. Oh my
Okay,
goodness.
stand straight up. It feels like the fucking floor is sideways.
Yeah.
Shifted. I do want to get back to that room.
That's crazy.
Sorry, I'm letting you use my lights.
Oh no, actually I prefer not because it reflects. Thank you. Oh yeah, that's perfect. Thank you. There you go. It'll take it.
Oh,
There
use
we
the
go.
fancy one.
Yeah,
Like
it'll
adjust it.
yeah, it adjusts there. It's really cool.
Same
Oh
here.
yeah, see, look at
iPhone.
that. That's a nice picture. It's like a nice, yeah, it's really cool. You just gotta hold still for a couple seconds.
Got everybody? I think we all like food.
I thought I left my flashlight in the car for a second. They don't go.
Good God.
Bro, I don't know how they fit 3 people in there. And that one.
Exactly.
Right, right above the cell, it says "fuck" carved in there.
Without it going
that cell.
Yeah, you can go in, yeah.
And that skull right there that they're going at, right here it says "fuck."
Did you see the Red Snyders?
I didn't look at
Yeah. Where's Joe and Jerky?
They went around back. They should be near the back somewhere.
They're in the back.
Yeah, they went around and took some pictures of the gatehouse thing behind us.
Oh.
And then they got there.
So you see how small these are? These are 5x7. They're 7 feet tall. Back in the 20s, 30s, and early 1940s, this cell block was general population. So they wouldn't have been the worst of the worst, and they would not have been locked up all day. But this was general population or mainline when this place was at peak overcrowding with almost 3,000 men. These would have had 3 men in each one of them. Back then they had 2 bunks, and the weakest of the 3 slept on the floor on a mattress. You can use your imagination when I say the weakest of the 3. In a place like this, grown men are not going to pull straws and see who sleeps on a dank mattress on the floor. Imagination.
Not strong in the chat.
In modern times, this was turned into a lockup. That's when they kept 1 man per cell, 22.5 hours a day in here. You'll notice the bean holes at the bottom of the doors, that's where they were fed on plasticware. That's usually when the staff and officers were assaulted. What they call gassing is the most common form of attack that I'll explain. It's basically where they would gas or throw bodily fluids, hot water, cold water, spitfire, urine, vomit, feces, and blood, or a mixture of any of that into the officer's face. Obviously, some of these guys had full-blown AIDS, HIV, hepatitis, syphilis. They're using their bodily fluids as weapons, is what they're doing. Officers worked here in 1987 are paid $8 an hour. It takes a very special breed of people to do this kind of work, to communicate with inmates in a healthy way, and to be here not just for their own selves, but to help the inmates along if they can. Now halfway down, you'll see a key lock. It takes a crutch key. Second stage of the lock is the steel bar up top. That's called the slam bar. That's the reason prisons are called the slammer. This was a popular locking mechanism in prisons of this era. It's dated back around 1921, 1922. I can't find the exact year, but they used it even in 1995. A lot of officers preferred it. Despite it being time consuming, it's foolproof compared to electronic cells down in a new wall that could malfunction or whatnot. So it still works, not half bad. The plumbing was nightmarish. If an inmate flushed his commode, whatever was in his commode ended up in his neighbor's sink. So if number 8 doesn't really like number 9, he can just use his bathroom and wait to flush it until he hears his neighbor late at night brushing his teeth. You think how nasty that would be? Rats in here would crawl off the commodes.
You better
My
not.
officer told me the cockroaches were so big in here you could put a saddle on them. 3 to 4 inches long, and they were flying cockroaches, if you ever seen them fly around. In here, there's barely any AC or heat. The heat, the steam heat below the windows have barely done anything. If you look up, you'll see some ceiling fans, you'll see some ventilation. The ventilation didn't work when this place closed. It hadn't worked for years. So all you got are those ceiling fans. The ceiling fans today are dark. The fan blades are dark because these guys used to set fires in here so much. They were allowed tobacco, so they did have matchbooks, setting fires. On the 3rd and 4th tier on a day like today, it would be upwards of 130 degrees, where I told you earlier that that was an actual recorded temperature. This is a struggle for these guys to stay alive. Heat exhaustion, heat stroke, unfortunately did claim the lives of some of these men. What they could do is they would take a little piece of cardboard, shove it up underneath the bottom lip of their doors, flood their cell from their sinking commode, and that cardboard would hold a couple inches of standing water in it that would allow them to lay in and splash themselves off. The problem is, as I've described with the plumbing in here, a lot of times these men are laying in another man's raw sewage. Nasty stuff. This would have smelled like BO, raw sewage, cigarette smoke, and bird droppings from the broken windows over the years. These guys used to try and break the windows out to keep this place cool. Now, real quick, I'm going to show you how to make a shank, and I hope to God this is not for future reference. So if everyone just kind of squeezes over by the gun walk there, which is where the fence is, I'm going to move back and forth because we have examples all up and down here, so no worries, I'll show everybody.
How to make a shank now. Oh, excuse me. I gotta go with it.
So like I say, I'll move up there here in just a second. Right here on number 8, you'll see this line through that panel. That line is score marks. This would have been done either by their state-issued razor blade, because they're required to shave, or with dental floss with an abrasive on it. So dental floss with Comet or dental floss with toothpaste, and they just score that till it's thin enough they can break it off by hand and sharpen it on the floor. You see those grooves, that's where they sharpened it. The top of Scrappy's door here, from the top of his panel down to my pinky, you see how that's not flush, how it's missing? That's what it looked like once it's popped off. Same thing on number 10. Top of that panel down to my pinky, you see how that's missing? Same thing on 11 actually. Number 11 has a nasty one because how easily you could hide that on somebody. See that top of that panel down to my pinky, how it's missing? Number 13 is a bad example. This was cut out on maintenance. 14, the top of that panel down to my pinky. See how it's not flush? Same thing from here down to there where it's removed. So they would cut that out with their door panels or the sides of their bunks, and again, sharpen them usually on the cell floor or on a cell bar. They used to find inmate-made weapons, shanks or shivs, just 2 names for the same thing, every day in the prison. To give you a better idea, we still occasionally will find a shank or 2. That's what I like to do in my pastime, is go shank hunting. So you'd be surprised. Now, these guys carry weapons around in this place in all kinds of ways. You'd never know they had it on them. They could put it in their boot, under their armpit, depending on the build of the inmate, under their belt. They could slip them into body cavities, anything. Now, we've been on tour now for about 55 minutes. You probably didn't imagine I had anything with me, but I've been carrying this all along in my waistband. This will kill somebody. This was an original shank made by an inmate here in the prison. This was taken, basically a plunger out of his sink, one of the handles out of his sink. He sharpened it down. He took medical gauze, speaker wire, it looks like, and then surgical tape, and he sealed it off. That'll run through somebody. That's an actual shank from the prison. It's not half bad. It's got a nice grip on it too. It's not half bad. So again, you can transport them in all kinds of ways. So they had guys that had dual blades underneath each armpit in here. So just to give you an idea, part of my little collection at home, if I say so myself. So North Hall is pretty active though. Come up here later, you're prone to hearing voices. You can hear footsteps, movement on the upper tiers, things like that. Visual sightings is very common in North Hall as well. So just to keep that in mind. Any questions? All right, we're going to go ahead and migrate down to the day room.
Yeah.
Almost hit the down into a pole.
Rocks. I want to find a shank, bro. Take one home.
Dude, this is so cool.
I'm definitely searching for a
This
shank.
is so cool.
Chad, you want to search for a shank with me?
No, I'm good.
You don't want to take one home?
Look at that toilet.
Yes, toilet and a sink.
Yeah, you can shit while you wash your hands.
Ew. Ew. Ew, that's nasty.
Just keep on shitting.
Oh, shit, I'm about brushing my teeth.
Your little neighbor.
This is where they used to take showers. I bet you.
So this would have been the day room. The officers and the staff that worked up here, if they wanted, they could eat their meals at these tables. This is really where they prepared inmate meals using the food cart over in the corner. Once it was loaded up, they bring it back up here, put all the servingware out on these tables. It was a lot easier and safer for them to stage, prepare inmate meals here. When these guys came back in off the yard after their second search, of course, they would set these guys down at these tables till they had 4 men ready to be showered. They showered them in a cage directly behind me, which doesn't look like our shower at home. It definitely doesn't operate like the Myra. The only plumbing is a small 1/4-inch pipe over the top of the fence. Doesn't put a lot of water down for full-grown men. Temperature and pressure of that water is controlled by the officers. So you can use your imagination. Some days they would only turn on hot water, some days only cold. Some days when you get fired up, they shake the water off on. So, imagination. Where we came from, the big block on the inside is A block. It basically looks the same, but you've got 160 cells in here, 20 on each tier. So the areas behind the fences that extend all the way down are called the gun blocks. That's where the officer were with a 12-gauge shotgun. So, any questions so far? All right, so we're going to continue moving along here. We're going to head into the administration building. Just please watch step in that door here.
Yeah.
Wasn't me.
Bless you.
Right after you, my good sir.
Ladies first.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
Oh yeah, this is the
See, I got to try harder. I wasn't even trying.
this is the video Sam and Colby were doing. Dude, the floor is filling.
So, right above you all would have been the old warden's home and offices to remind you where you are. But this immediate area we call the wheel, just for this strange contraption here. It's basically an old-fashioned revolving door from 1894. It ran on a trolley car motor. That's why there's a spindle on top. It would have had a cloth belt around it. Now, the wheel and the north wagon gate were the main entrances and exits in and out of the prison for anybody and everybody. Didn't matter if you're coming to work, visit, or live here. There's only 2 of these on Earth. The other one is still in operation in Manchester, England, at a prison called Strangeways, H.M. Strangeways. The wheel doubled as an extra layer of security as well, keeping inmates over here and away from the front and upstairs. It would have been operated by an officer behind the wheel, an armed officer who had a very big key for this door, arguably one of the more important locks in the prison. That's one reason you'll notice this side is flush. Be a little bit trickier for an inmate to jam that with something where they could pop it open later. I'm sure some of y'all have Netflix. There's a show on Netflix called Mind Hunter. It's a series on FBI profilers. If you enjoyed Criminal Minds, you get a kick out of Mind Hunter. Season 1, they have an episode on Richard Speck. In Richard Speck's episode, you'll see the wheel, and you'll see some of the new wall cell blocks that we'll be finishing up in before terribly long. On the right of the wheel would have been payroll and processing, and on the left of the wheel was the old visitation room they used until the early 80s when it was phased out. The 2 rooms over on that side, you had a U.S. Post Office. They even had inmates that had jobs in there sorting the mail. And then on the other side, you had a commissary, a leather shop, and even a barber shop. The barber shop was even open to the public. As recent as 1995, families would bring their children in here to get their hair cut by a convicted murderer because it was a bargain. He'd only charge you and your family about a quarter, 50 cents a head, and he would shave grown men's necks with straight razors. He was a model inmate from what's been described to me. He'd done a lot of good work, very trustworthy. He was granted parole. The last update I heard, that man is now living in Houston, Texas with his new barbershop in operation. So it's good for him. He got a new start at life, and hopefully keeps it that way. So, never know there. Any questions so far? All right, so from here I'm going to get y'all acquainted with the darkest area of the prison, which is directly below your feet. It's what we call the hall, and that was solitary confinement. Now, I'm a straight shooter about things. I'm going to tell you right now, ghosts, spirits don't really bother me a whole lot. Bats I'm terrified of. The hall is our bat cave. There's probably 2 to 3 dozen of them down there, at least that's where they live. And what's probably going to happen is I'm going to take us outside. I'll show you how to get in there. I'm going to tell you about it. You won't see me in there. So, I am a self-admitted, I'm self-proclaimed wolf.
That's where you get grabbed.
So if you're making a video for YouTube, please cut that out.
No, sir.
Keep it in.
Keeping it in. Mean clip, bro.
I'm gonna go sit this
Oh, that air feels good.
Must have been a ghost.
It was you. It was probably Tyler. Don't be messing with me.
The man 7 feet behind, the man 2 feet behind.
Don't be messing with me.
On the other
Causes
side
a
of
big red glow.
There's this glow.
You know what that is? That is actually one of the oil pads.
That's why it's probably oil flame.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a big oil pad. Honestly,
I didn't see any smoke or anything from it. What is that?
yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what it is. Over there, that's called Robert's Ridge. Then you got like Dry Fork Ridge and all that. But all the ridges in town have all those well pads and stuff.
Oh my God. You sick.
Yeah.
I just need to dust it out.
You got to go down there for the
That's definitely hard.
Oh, I ain't gonna try. I ain't even try.
Is this
That gives me
sugar shack?
No, that is the hole.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the sugar shack is in the basement, but on the other side, on the new side, yeah, like I say, I can't bring myself to go down there today. But I'll at least tell y'all.
But we can.
Yes, you all can. If you're braver than I am, you definitely can. So, this was the hole. This was solitary confinement till about the mid-1950s. That was literally a dungeon. Inmates were shackled to the walls down there by the wrists, left in more or less like a half-standing position. I've heard and read over a night, some over a month at a time down there. When they closed the front doors, it would be total darkness even in the noonday sun. I've read some of the old historical texts that described how inmates would go blind down there. Some guys would go crazy down there, I mean, you can only imagine. One of the older officers told me back in those days you never used to be able to take a step anywhere in there. You'd be crunching on some kind of, roach or field mouse, rat, whatever. Now, when they finished building the south end of the penitentiary around 1959, they repurposed the basement here. They removed solitary, and they put a boiler room in there and a maintenance area, maintenance office, and a tool room. They had a trustee inmate who practically lived down there, a guy named R.D. Wall. He had a life sentence for a rape conviction from Logan County, West Virginia.
RD Wall would cut the grass, he would take care of the boilers and maintain the tool room, and in return he could live down there. Now, the problem amongst population was they considered him one of the warden's go-to snitches. Kind of like a warden's pet kind of guy, if you want to call it that. Now, obviously, you know, if you're in a place like this, and if you're considered an informant, whether you are one or not, it's not very good. October 8th, 1979, around midnight, 2 inmates, Charlie Plants and Billy Cremines, they managed to gain access down into the hole. They went into RD's room, where at the time he was in a far back corner using the bathroom. They began to attack him. He was able to break free from them momentarily. They got him back down on the middle floor and decapitated him. He missed morning count. It wasn't until about 6:30 or so in the morning. COs go down there. They find him laying in the middle of his room. They said his head was hanging on by about that much of his neck, and the tips of some of his fingers were cut off. I don't know if that was defense wounds or what. That is a hot spot of paranormal activity down there. We get a lot of battery drain on cell phones, cameras, flashlights, electronics. If you do go down there later, it would not hurt to check your battery level so you know how to compare it when you walk back out. Also, physical contact is very common down there. Men and women, if I had a nickel for every time I've taken folks down there in the day and night and seen people getting touched, I would be a rich man. The only difference is typically guys get touched on their arm or side, whereas ladies, you have like a finger around your face or neck, or have your hair played with is very common. And we attribute a lot of that to RD. You know, we do think he was one of the friendlier guys. He was an old timer. He'd spent a lot of time here. He was a convict, so we, you know. When you go down there later, there is a hallway that forms like a T, and there's 4 rooms in there. His room was the room in the far back left corner when you go in later. The far back left corner. So, like I said, I can't bring myself to go down there.
What was his name again?
I'm too terrified. R.D. Wall.
RD.
He went by R.D., but his real name was Robert Daniel.
I want to get touched. I want to get slapped in the hand.
Sure enough. All right. If you go down there, just make sure you're up to date on your rabies shots. Yeah, we actually did, in all seriousness though, a couple months ago we had a bat up in Wheeling that tested positive for rabies.
Oh, God.
It makes me really, really nervous. My partner just got bit a couple weeks ago. Y'all have any questions?
Can I go down there now?
If you want to real quick, that's up to you. But, I ain't going down there. Just make it quick because we still got a few more spots. You'll have even more time here later to go down and see it for yourself.
Yeah. Field trip. Field trip.
I can't believe you actually let it come down.
Yeah.
I thought he was going to say you're going to have to wait.
Better put that.
I don't trust that. That's it.
Did you just pull out wood cold?
Oh yeah, here it is. Here's his room.
What was his name?
Yeah, this is his room.
What was his name?
Right there. That's where the killing took place.
What was his name?
RD.
He died right here.
West Virginia was in Wheeling. So we got Independence Hall up there. That's it went from Wheeling to Charleston because they were kind of still on edge about an incoming invasion to the south. They kept moving back and forth. That's why you'll notice the Mount Olive Correctional Complex is about a half hour from Charleston, down in Fayette County. My old neck of the woods. So, if someone tells you that the people of Moundsville had a choice between the prison or the WVU, you can prove them wrong. With history. All right. So this next area that we'll get ready to move to is the second floor medical unit. The infirmary and psychiatric unit. Want to get you acquainted with it. There may be a bat or two up there. There's not much I can do about that. I'm just going to turn into a little crybaby. But what you're going to see up there was put in 1972 is when the infirmary was installed. The original infirmary would have sat on the north yard in a building that obviously we no longer have. It's torn out in the late 60s. You're going to see a lot of equipment in the infirmary. It's all original medical equipment from the prison's operation. You're going to see beautiful artwork in the infirmary, and it was done by a guy here named Danny Lehman, who went by Spider. He ran a biker gang in the prison known as the Avengers. On the street, they're a motorcycle club, and here they ran this place in the 70s and 80s.
Oh, the glass?
Until the AV took over. So, Spider was a very talented artist here in the prison. He eventually was murdered the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, 1986, in North Hall by the Aryan Brotherhood. They took an 11-inch long piece of, I believe it was fencing, it was ran into his eye, pierced his brain. The medical floor, we're going to start off in the infirmary. We're going to keep moving until we go through the 2 wards where the beds were. And then we're going to end up in the psych unit at the far other end before we go back downstairs. It's very active up here. You'll get a lot of noises, a lot of thumping, banging, footsteps, and running. The sounds of movement is usually heard from the stairwells at either direction, but you also get shadows, physical contact, voices, EVPs. Honestly, the full 9 yards. So, when we go up here, just please be careful when you use these steps. Tonight, these steps are in really sketchy shape.
I've seen 4 of them in here.
Yeah, I just saw it. It's right up.
Huh?
Oh, is it hanging there?
Second floor.
Feels like the sanitarium.
Like snakes, it doesn't bother me a bit, bats, you know, they happen.
So like I say, this side is the infirmary. We're going to pass through into the ward where the beds would have been. And then we're going to pass on into the other ward, which was used for the psych unit. Once you go through the big red door behind me, that side of this floor was all psychiatric unit that the inmates called Fantasy Island.
Yeah.
That's where I'm going. Once we're left free, I want to get pissed off.
Okay. It's a bat.
I'm used to bats. We go to abandoned places, so. He loves us. The bat. Look, there's a security camera. Yeah. If I see somebody vandalizing this, they get
If I caught some vandalizing this place, I'd probably beat their ass.
beat them like the guards. Waterboard them.
Is Joe gonna actually use a Ouija board? Use it downstairs.
Should be able to. I mean, Sam and Colby did.
Yeah, but they paid out.
Well, they used, it was kind of like a Ouija board.
I mean, it was ghost equipment,
Yeah.
and plus it's a board game too.
Yeah.
Say it's just a board game. It's not ghost equipment.
Nah, Mary Beth says it's the devil.
I don't even know if that's on me. I think I touched your fucking finger.
No, you touched this.
Oh, I thought I touched your finger.
Do you want me to touch you?
You say it easy.
From that door all the way to the stairwell. So when we continue on past the nurse's
Yeah,
station
dude.
right here, you're going to have 2 rooms on your left
Mine's almost
through
gone.
the door, and 2 rooms on your right through the door. First room on your right, you'll see the 2 little cells. That's the closest thing. They had like rubber rooms here. The psych subjects for suicide watch. So, in here is still very active. You get a lot of noises, things like that. Did have a man take his life in the bathrooms there with a razor from the bar. Unfortunately, I don't know his name. We get a lot of ECP activity in that doorway in the bathroom.
Yeah, they take card.
That vending machine takes a card.
No, they have a drink. They have, right behind the register.
A medical in there?
You have card. I forgot they had a
You
fridge.
need to go home.
I'm too tired for this shit.
Nah, you got it.
You need to walk.
I got Starbucks.
Dude, I'm wide awake.
You need to walk all the way back home to Virginia. Fuck that.
I
Walking
said
back to Virginia.
I'm wide awake.
I'm not walking back to Ohio,
You're good.
Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Maryland, back to Virginia. No.
My hair feel good?
It's sweaty.
Yeah, I know.
It's very wet.
Just the way I like it.
Whoa.
I'll tell you before. I'll let you know tomorrow.
Are we going back the way we went to get home?
Unless it's a route test, but I do want to get
Yeah, that's fine. I didn't see that way.
I wonder if that's
Your son would drop.
I know, I love it. I don't know what's worse. This or the sanitarium in the heat.
Oh, the room above the
yeah, that's what
visitor room. Hey, you're sick. No. I'm so lost. I got more appropriate language.
Oh, it feels so good. Oh my gosh. Oh.
Tyler, you'll be alright.
Do you want another piece of gum?
How about you ask?
Wait, here, yeah, that takes you into Micro Shack there, yeah.
There's the Sugar Shack.
That was an indoor rack.
Sugar Shack.
What's that?
That's that one place where I told you was really good evidence.
Someone wrote a name in the concrete over there. Voodoo doll ritual thing.
What?
And it's the concrete over there.
Oh my gosh.
They got a voodoo ritual
Yeah.
thing they carved in there.
That's where Sam and Colby got some really good evidence there.
We'll go there too.
Oh yeah.
We'll go to the places he said. And then we'll just go.
Yeah.
I do want to explore this courtyard. I take some pictures.
Anyone have any questions so far? Anything maybe you've seen that I haven't talked about? Like I said, I wish we had longer on these tours because I just don't like to feel like I'm flapping my guns too much because I'm keeping you all from having your own time to do it yourself. So, like I say, if you have any questions, just feel free to ask. And I'll be in the lobby for the rest of the night as long as y'all are here if you want any stories. Or I'm throwing a lot of names out at y'all as well. I'd be more than happy to write anything down for you as well that I've mentioned for your reference.
You know all the names, right? You know all the names, right?
Almost, yeah.
All right, good.
I have a question.
Yes.
See, there's a lot of video cameras here.
Yes.
Do y'all catch and record a lot of activity on the installed video cameras?
You know, I'm sure they do. Unfortunately, we very rarely get access to those. Those are owned by the state.
Okay.
They're owned by the DOC, and
Good to check out.
it would be a lot of fun, yeah, to watch them. But unfortunately, we very rarely get to see them. They just keep them up, not just for security, but they use them to monitor all the law enforcement training and correctional, military training, and all that good stuff. But you'll notice here on the south yard, this side of the prison looks a lot different from the north side, where this was built by inmates, not the convicts. The inmates would have otherwise built the south end, but when they started in 1929, later in October of that year, Great Depression began, right? So the Congress passed the law, you couldn't hire an inmate for work. So it would take construction crews and contractors about 30 years to finish this end because they didn't have the steadiest flow of supplies because of, you know, the Depression, World War II, Korean conflict, so on and so forth. Everything on this yard, on South Yard, is original except for the obstacle course in the southeast corner. The school bus over by the chapel is also not original. Those are both here for the training. But this yard was your mainline population yard. So you could have 200, 300 plus guys out here at once, typically watched by one officer with a radio. The tower officers are the ones that are actually armed. These guys did not have it nice. I don't like saying they had it nice, but they surely had it a heck of a lot better than the guys over in North Hall did. These guys could spend most of their days out here if they wanted, from 8 in the morning until 10 at night, aside from commitments to work or schooling and child time, so on and so forth. They had a walking track that goes all the way around. They used to play baseball, football, softball down in the field, very much like the Longest Yard movies. The local high schools and college teams used to come in here and play the convicts, and tickets would be sold to their families so they could come watch as well. Definitely will never see that again in today's world. They had a weight pad there with free weights they could lift or kill each other with. The chapel, for sake of time, I will not take you in there. If you want to check the chapel out later, that was an all-faith chapel built by the inmates around 1980. Local churches donated $20,000. Christian inmates donated the rest. They pitched in to build their all-faith chapel. Most of the services were Christian each week, but they also had some Muslim and Hindu services, and the rest were for the Satan guys. When I say that, I mean a former officer told me that he estimated upwards of 10% of the inmates were into devil worship. They were able to use that chapel as well. They had a handball wall over there, basketball court, tetherball pole. Inmates would sit at the picnic tables, write cards to their loved ones, play checkers, chess, arm wrestle, just sit there and talk. They would gamble, even though they weren't allowed to gamble. Didn't mean it didn't happen. Gambling got so out of hand that for a while, they actually confiscated playing cards here, and that you could only use them in visitation. Well, if there's a will, there's a way. These guys started taking dominoes and writing 10 of hearts or whatever on either side of the dominoes and using their dominoes to play their poker with or blackjack, whatever. The bathrooms over there were also built by the inmates. They don't look like a regular bathroom, but they used to. They built the walls from the floor to the ceiling. Issue is, they had a private bathroom in the middle of a maximum security prison yard. A lot of nasty, shady, sketchy, wild, wacky stuff happened in there. A guy named Mark was over in the corner where the stall now is. He was trying to ask a couple guys for favors, right? They weren't about that. They grabbed him by the back of his head and just about bashed his face off everything they could find in that corner. My buddy Steve has copies of the crime scene photos. I've seen it. I don't know how he survived. His head looked like ground beef. He had to have reconstructive surgery on his face. And after that is when they tore the walls out. So if you have to use the bathrooms later over there, just be sure everyone's staring at the wall for you. In the event, no, for real, don't use the bathrooms. So we got those inside for you. In the event of bad weather, they would take these guys off the yard and they would send them into their indoor recreation room that they called the Sugar Shack. And we're going to go down there, get you acquainted with that. After that, we got one more spot before I turn you loose to the wolves. I mean the bats.
Let us go.
Watch your head, watch your step in here. There's low clearance all throughout.
Yeah.
Because he said stay as long as you want.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh. Yeah. No, it's like a, like they put their haunted props down here. Yeah, right there.
If I was down here with no light and I saw that,
Dude, literally right there. That's where Sam and Colby were, and they got a lot of paranormal right there. Like their REM pod was going crazy.
I'm gonna find out tonight if it actually works.
Yeah.
So this was the Sugar Shack. This was basically like a pool hall. You had pool tables, ping pong tables, couches, arcade games, even a bowling machine for a few years. Inmates had different colored light bulbs in here. It gave it like a psychedelic vibe. They were able to paint this room, as you can tell. For example, on the back wall it says West Virginia Cougars, their mascot for their sports teams and boxing team. All the artwork is original from the inmates except for the real primitive looking stuff that looks like Mothman. That was not done by inmates, that was done by MTV when they came to film Fear at the prison. They done that without permission, by the way. They didn't even ask us, so no thanks to them. But everything else is original. This is part of the haunted house attraction during October. All the stuff, all that clutter along that side of the room, pay no attention to it, that's just haunted house props. But you could have anywhere from 75 to 100 inmates in here at a time for a couple hours. It's a pretty dangerous area for officers to be in, so a lot of times officers would just neglect to come in here and watch these guys. They would just wait till the last inmate left, and then walk in and make sure nothing or no one was left behind. You can use your imagination in a place like this, knowing that these guys can probably get away with anything they want to in an area like this. That's basically why they call it the Sugar Shack. So a lot of, again, more of the same. A lot of nasty, weird, wacky, wild stuff went on in here. A lot of consensual, non-consensual stuff went on in here, right? A lot of assaults, stabbings, beatings. If an inmate had trouble with another guy, he had a problem with another guy, all he's got to do is wait in the Sugar Shack till he comes in here and you take care of it. So I will tell you for your reference here in a little bit, if you're in here later and you hear noises upstairs, that is from the main street, from the main hallway. Also, our lobby is directly above us. So if someone washes their hands, uses the bathroom, whatever, the plumbing comes down over in that corner and the water sometimes gets rather loud. So just be ready for that. Sugar Shack, you get a lot of activity in here, typically visual activity, a lot of shadow activity. Physical contact is also pretty common. I personally can vouch for that. I personally have been touched in here numerous times. Most recently this January, I was over in the corner, felt like someone had swatted my ear. A year ago, last March, I was over by the columns with the flowers, and I had my hand tickled, literally tickled. I felt fingertips tickling my hand, so it was weird stuff. So, just to keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Pretty popular area, though, on all the TV shows and YouTube shows and all that, so pretty notorious. Do y'all have any questions?
Do they know how many deaths were in this room?
So I'm a straight shooter about it. Unless I see it documented, I don't like to say it. I've never seen any documented murders in here. I do know they had a guy that died later from injuries that, were inflicted on him in here, but no actual deaths. Now again, that's another one of those misconceptions. If you watch some of the TV shows over the years, they say, you know how TV is. So. But I've never heard of anyone actually dying in here. I've heard a lot of nasty stories of guys being carried out from in here. I know they had a couple guys on the other side of that door that were stabbed pretty badly. But no one that ever died in the Sugar Shack that I can actually
It's probably in
validate.
my backpack. I gotta look through it.
Still waiting on that day.
Yeah.
Because it wouldn't surprise me.
Right.
It has to be in there. If not, it's probably in mine.
What
I
was
have
the
to look
name
through
of
it.
the head of the AB that was murdered? What was his name?
William Red Snyder.
Red.
Yeah, he went by Red, but yeah, William Snyder. Yeah, that would have been him. And then Blue, Rusty killed him. And the guy that ordered Red's murder was Blue Sarton. He was the muscle for the AB at the time. So he was doing a lot of the work. All right, so at this point, usually I say we have our grand finale before I release you to the wolves. Newwall. Take you up where mainline inmates would have lived. The largest housing unit in prison, Newwall, is 320 cells. It's twice the size of North Hall. So I'll get you acquainted with that, and then I'll be out of your hair. So again, just watch your step out here and watch your head.
Look. Cody and me.
Right in front of you.
Is that your eye?
Is the smoking area anywhere outside of the yard?
Yes, actually, I forgot to mention that. Shoot.
Yeah, right over here, there's those brick picnic tables, and that's the smoking vaping area. Right over there, yeah, totally.
So when Red Cider got here, he was like the big dog. Everyone didn't want to mess with him.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
He was actually here on 2 different stints. First time he was here was back in the late 60s for an arson conviction. And then he got out, and then he ended up, when he got out from his first stint, he found out that his 19-year-old sister was with a guy that was in his 20s. And for Red, in his mind, he thought that that was a little too old for his sister. And so he told his father to do something about it, and he didn't. So he took I believe it was a .308, shot him in the face, and then he went down the street to his sister's boyfriend's house and held not just him, but his entire family, little kids and everything, hostage in the living room until he blew his head off in front of the kids. Real nice guy. And then state troopers showed up. He runs out the back door. He's firing at the troopers. They shot him in the leg.
Yeah.
That's when they took him into custody. And then, that was his final conviction before he was brought here for the last time. So, also, I forgot to mention, our smoking vaping area is over by kind of between us and the chapel at the brick picnic table. All right.
How do we get? How we follow it?
Let's drive home.
There is a drain by the wall. Just be aware of that so you don't twist your ankle. You have to get close to the wall.
Oh yeah, that's what I want to do.
Oh.
Yeah, if you happen to get close to the wall, there is a drain there.
Is this the hallway that you saw, like that 7-foot shadow, and like you didn't want to walk, you didn't want to turn your back?
No, that was actually North Hall.
North Hall?
So the side of North Hall where we were earlier on B block,
Yeah.
it would have been cell 17. There was a pentagram in there, and that would have been the cell it walked out of. And when it walked out, it was just literally, it didn't turn. When it walked out, it just done this.
Yeah.
Like that. So, but no, that was B block and North Hall, cell 17. And yeah, that guy, Kenny, he's actually still at Mount Olive. He's going to die down there last I heard. Murder, so. Yeah, like I say, just for those of you who just came in, just be careful anytime you're in New Wall, there is a drain channel by the walls. But this is New Wall, this is your mainline population housing. 320 cells in here, these are 5x7, but a little bit taller than North Hall. Some of these had 1 man in them, some had 2 men in them. So 500-600 inmates lived in here over the years. On a good day, they would have 4 officers watching them. Because of understaffing, I've heard as little as 2 officers to watch these guys. Each block had a gang shower behind the center wall. They could shower as many as 9 men at once. You are standing on J block. Street side is K block. Down below you is L block and M block. So J, K, L, M. Right in the middle is an area called the break. And that's where the COs would have been. Typically, at least the COs that were armed with the weapons. They would have been locked up there in the middle. Now, if you go over on the street side of New Wall at any time tonight, just please be aware that is part of the haunted house attraction. There's some mannequins and stuff over there, so don't let that startle you. Just forewarn. But New Wall, you do get a lot of activity in here. Usually full sightings, visual sightings, even in broad daylight. We've had apparitions spotted in here. You will hear disembodied voices whistling. You'll hear on the upper tiers. You try and chase it down. You can never figure out where it's coming from. A lot of knocking, thumping, things like that in here. EVPs, electronic voice phenomena, is pretty common as well. The 3 men that were murdered during the 1986 riot, those guys lost their life in this area right here on J Block. Kent Sly, Richard Dean, and Jeff Atkinson were basically all stabbed and beaten to death. Jeff Atkinson, with the exception, he was flung off the upper tiers twice. This last time that took his life was from the 4th tier. They held him out by his ankles, dropped him head first. Donald Lane was the name of the inmate that witnessed this, and according to Donald Lane, he said that when his head slapped off the edge of that shower wall, it looked like a pumpkin exploded. So those guys, like I say, they did pass away in this area. But like I say, obviously there's certain things that I'd like to cross over just for sake of time to give y'all more time. Is there any questions that y'all have? Anything you're curious about that maybe I didn't mention? Anything that you've seen I didn't talk about?
I have a question. What about the cages in the other spot? Why they got them up there and not in here?
Up in North Hall?
Yeah.
Like the crow's nest and all that?
Yeah.
Just because they would have had those for the officers to move up with the shotguns if they needed a better line of sight to watch their partner. Whereas in here they could just, I guess, use the brake for that purpose, just to go up and kind of have a line of sight looking down the tiers. And I guess in as good a faith as they could give these guys being mainline, you know, they didn't have to worry about them as much as they did in SAG. But yeah, and that's another reason why you have all that caging up in North Hall, you know, there's all that extra protection because they used to throw stuff down. And so not as much of a problem in here. Yeah, because you got this block here, and then, of course, it's kind of hard to see, but down below the break, it's basically mirrored. So you've got a whole other set of 160 cells down below the break here in the middle. So, all right, well, one thing, here in New Vault, you can go all the way up to the 4 tiers. In North Hall, unfortunately, the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th tiers are closed off because the ranges are made of like that battleship steel looking stuff. It's kind of rusted, it's pitted. And here, as you can tell, it's concrete, it's a little bit safer. Just obviously be careful if you go all the way up. Also, just to recap real quick, showed you the smoking and vaping area on the yard. Gift shop will be closed at 11:30. Be sure to keep that museum door closed for Amanda and I, so it keeps it nice and cool for y'all when you cool down. It keeps the bats out here with y'all and away from us. You don't necessarily have to stay till midnight, but regardless of what time that you leave, be sure that you're in the lobby by midnight ready to be paroled. Just be sure that you're ready to sign out next to where you signed in on your parole papers. So, other than that, if we don't have your sign out for where you signed in, we'll be calling you here later, waking you up in your nice hotel bed, making sure that you're okay and you haven't fell down somewhere in here. Trust me, that's happened before. It's kind of scary. So, other than that, just stay safe, have fun. Naturally, it's the only prison you can have this much fun in, right? So, if you need anything, have any questions at all, also, we have maps in our lobby if you need them. And other than that, hand it over to you.
Let's go to the lobby first because I need
All
to
right.
get a drink.
Yeah, he's got to use the restroom.